Come on, go in. What the heck? Come on. Well, that shouldn't be in here. Why did that work? Ugh, good grief. Not one of my prouder moments, I'll grant you, but I'm sure you've been in the same place before. Filters can be like this, especially if we don't understand how the operators work. In Odoo, we have 8 operators we can work with. Is in, is not in, equals, does not equal, contains, does not contain, is set, and is not set. If any of that didn't make sense to you, stick around. We're going to explain this in detail so that you understand how to use these operators to make your filters work better in Odoo. Before anything else, this is the data set we're working with here. This data set has specific attributes, color being one, type being another, being number, shape, letter, and number of sides. We could go on with this, but there are specific attributes, and we have to use these attributes to filter our data. If we were looking at Odoo in a list view, we would see each attribute represented as a column, and we'd have a record with specific attributes. So say the letter A that's yellow is one of those records, and attributes are type, letter, name is A, color is yellow. Okay, so 2 key terms there. We've got our attributes and we've got our operators. Both are important for our filters. We need to understand those to move forward. So look at this filter here. It's not much of a filter. Really anything can get through here. We need to do better than that. We've got these other standard filters here where we've got type equals shape, type equals number, and type equals letter. But we want to go a bit deeper than that. So here's our data set. Let's start with equals. So we could very easily say that color equals orange. And that's going to leave us with just these guys here. We could also say color equals blue, and we end up with these guys here. If we wanted to flip that, we could say color does not equal blue, and we end up with these guys here. We could also go further and say that we have an attribute on the color called type, set as primary, secondary, tertiary. So we could say that color.type equals primary, which would give us blue, red, and yellow. Or of course, we could do the inverse of that by saying not primary. So equals and not equals, fairly basic, but the important thing to understand is in Odoo, these are case sensitive. So you can't just type in lowercase what you're expecting to find. If you're wanting to get a little bit looser with what you're doing, go to the next option here. Let's move on to contains and does not contain. The main use for contains is to look at strings, to say this string or character, so sentence, word, or whatever, contains another specific character. So let's look at this as it pertains to our data set. So we could say that our color name contains O, which would give us orange, yellow, and I think that's it, so don't kill me if that's wrong. We could certainly do this with E, or really any other letter, and then we could flip this around and say, actually, I don't want it to contain that, so really, we only get pink in that instance. I may have led you to believe that contains is all about a single character, but you can actually expand that and put in words. You could put in sentences even, where it says this item or this attribute that I'm looking at contains this string, which a string is any combination of characters. So you can use contains in that way as well. You can also use contains to try and filter one-to-manys. So say we're looking at a sales order, you could say order lines contains this specific product, and that can work too, but you'll want to play with that a little bit to make sure it works the way you want it to. So now let's get into one that's a bit more interesting, and this is in and is not in. So what is in allows us to do is say, I want to work from a list here. So we're going to say color is in green or blue. So we have a list of colors that works for our data set to set our filter up. We can also say is not in and get the opposite here. But the cool thing is that we can select different attribute values that then apply to this to make our filter work. Once again, you'll want to play with this but essentially it allows us to say, I want these 3 salespeople, I want to keep an eye on them, or maybe it's these 5 customers. You can create a list that you want to look at. Super helpful. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is set and is not set. So there are a ton of uses for this in Odoo, but essentially we would say, okay, let's go with number of sides here. So we're going to say number of sides is not set. So for our type, letter, and number, our number of sides is not set. And for our heart, because it confuses people, the number of sides is not set, meaning nobody has put in here the number of sides that are present for this record. Okay? Obviously, we can do the opposite and say number of sides is set, which I don't know why I left this guy in here before. I don't know how many sides he has unless we're talking about polygons, and we're not necessarily going to get into that. But really, this is extremely useful for us because it helps us to see where there might be inconsistencies in our data. And it also allows us to say, if we're looking at a contact card, sales orders is not set. So we have no sales orders tied to this customer, or invoices is not set. So we don't have any invoices tied to this customer. It's super useful for us in Odoo because we can see where there are either holes in our data or we don't have any records tied to that person or record yet. So is set, is not set. Make sure and play around with this and see what you can do. But it's a great way for us to check and see that our information is regular, especially if we weren't requiring a field before this. It's very helpful for us, and we can look again at contacts that don't have sales yet, that don't have invoices. You can use this for all sorts of things. So we've really outgrown this guy now. Obviously, most of you would say, yeah, I outgrew that a long time ago. But as far as filtering goes, now you have way more tools in your tool belt to be able to get exactly what you want. So go out and use that. Good luck.